For more on where Kavanaugh's nomination stands, I'm joined by Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York. Senator, what is your understanding of where things are at right now?
Well, I feel like what we're seeing from the Republican Party and certainly the White House is just attack, deny, and try to shove this through so quickly so that you can't actually have a real hearing or a proper investigation. The fact that they won't allow the FBI to investigate these claims is shocking. The fact that they don't intend to call corroborating witnesses is concerning. And the fact that they're not even going to assess Mr. Ramirez's claims is also unacceptable. So I just feel like they're just pushing this through at all costs.
The president today referred to the claim by Ms. Ramirez that she was drunk, that she was confused, and that all of this is a, quote, con job in his eyes. What do you think of that?
I hope the American people are paying attention. I hope American women are paying attention. President Trump has already shown in his words and deeds that he doesn't value women. He's attacking someone who has come forward, a survivor. They wonder why survivors don't come forward. It's exactly for this reason, because they're treated so poorly by the commander-in-chief. She's being berated. She's being accused of lying. She's being disparaged publicly by this president. It's disgraceful. And I just hope the American public and women all across this country are paying attention so they can call their senators and urge their senators to vote no on Kavanaugh. Clearly, he does not have the character or the honesty to be a Supreme Court justice.
Do you think your colleagues on the Republican side, or do you think they've convinced themselves this is some kind of conspiracy, this is some sort of grand plot that you and your colleagues on the Democratic side have cooked up to sabotage Kavanaugh?
I can't get into the minds of the Republicans, but I can tell you what they've done is unconscionable. They're not even giving the basic process that they gave to Anita Hill, to not even have the FBI investigation, to make it impossible to call corroborating witnesses who have relevant information to offer, I think is really disconcerting. But I think if America's public does speak out, we have a chance of defeating this nominee on the merits.
You don't think it's a done deal? You think there is an open question as to whether the votes are there and whether this is going to happen or not?
I believe it's an open question because I believe that if the American people speak out loudly on this and really talk about their own personal experiences and how they see this unfolding and how offended they are by the president's remarks and offended they are by this process, I think they could change votes of senators today. So I think it's a moment when America's women need to be heard and that Americans who care about justice need to be heard.
Let me ask you, there's been a strange line I think Republicans have tried to walk here. I think clearly they've been counseled not to try to not disparage or attack the accusers and have an open mind. But clearly a lot of them just want to go ahead and vote anyway. I want to get your reaction to some of the comments we've heard from some of your colleagues and also from Kevin Cramer, who's trying to be one of your colleagues running in North Dakota for the Republican Party. Take a listen.
So you think these women are making it up?
They had a little help, I have a feeling. Accusations are being made about it, things that didn't happen, and I think it's just very unfortunate.
If the accusation is enough, God help us all around here. I will respectfully listen, but if there's nothing new here, I am not going to deny him a promotion to the Supreme Court based on a 35-year-old accusation.
Even if it's all true, does it disqualify him? It certainly means that he did something really bad 36 years ago, but does it disqualify him from the Supreme Court?
Let's start with that last question. What's your answer to that?
Well, the fact that this candidate for Senate doesn't believe that someone who assaults a young woman who's a minor, 15 years old, assaults her, covers her mouth when she tries to scream, and that story is being corroborated by people who have heard this story before. The fact that she told her therapist 5 years ago, the fact that she told her husband 5 years ago, a friend a year ago, the fact that she's taking a lie detector, is asking the FBI to investigate, those are all indicia of truth. And so the fact that he says, even if it's true, that this is not grounds to disqualify him, I don't know what planet he's living on. That's a violent crime. He should be going to jail if he was allowed to be prosecuted today. It's not okay. And so I think the fact that so many people, so many Republicans and my colleagues are saying, oh, it's just an allegation. Well, it's not just with an allegation. You assess their credibility. That's their job as senators. They're supposed to assess the credibility of people who are coming forward to say, I don't think this person is trustworthy. I don't think this person is telling the truth. I think they've lied under oath about their past. And And then to roll out a Fox News interview as if it's an FBI investigation. A Fox News interview is not an FBI investigation. They didn't even ask all the relevant questions. And the fact that he downplayed his drinking while his best friend wrote a whole book about their drunken behavior, the fact that his college roommate said that he would come home drunken and he would come home belligerent, the fact that he said about Ms. Ramirez, and this is again Brett Kavanaugh's college roommate, said, I believe her because she has the kind of personality, she was kind, she was thoughtful, she couldn't imagine her making this up. That's called corroborating evidence. It's things you hear and listen to and then assess, who do I believe? That's your job. Now, this is not a court of law. We are not proving beyond a reasonable doubt. No one's going to jail. This is about, do you deserve the promotion? Do you deserve this job opportunity to be a Supreme Court justice, to have a lifetime appointment, to make fundamental decisions about women's rights for perhaps decades to come? Do you have the privilege to serve? Not whether you're going to be convicted in law. So every time you hear on Fox News, oh, innocent, assume you're innocent, you have to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They're trying to confuse voters. They're trying to confuse people across this country. That's what that is not what this is about. This is about, do you believe he's honest? Do you believe he has the character to have a lifetime appointment? Do you think his story isn't adding up? And based on hearing from these two women, these strong, credible women, and their stories, and all the corroborating evidence, I believe them.
All right, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.